Death Note gives us something anime rarely does. A story where the villain is the main character, and you spend the entire series half hoping he wins. But Kira's reign of terror doesn't rest on one person's shoulders. 4 characters pick up that notebook and choose to kill with it, each for wildly different reasons. So let's break down every single one of them, starting with the genius who started it all, Light Yagami. Light Yagami is a straight-A student, top of his class, son of a police chief, and within 5 days of finding a notebook, he's already killed 2 people. Not by accident, not under duress. He tested it on a criminal, watched the news, confirmed the death, and then did it again just to be sure. That's not a slow descent into madness. That's a guy who needed exactly one excuse. Here's the thing about Light that makes him different from basically every other anime villain in existence. He's not corrupted. The Death Note doesn't possess him. It doesn't whisper to him at night or slowly erode his sanity like some cursed artifact. Every single name he writes is a conscious, deliberate, fully human choice. The notebook is just a pen and paper. He's the monster, and the speed of it is what really gets people. This is a 17-year-old kid living in a police household, eating dinner with his detective father every night, and within weeks he's orchestrating the deaths of hundreds of criminals while maintaining perfect grades and zero suspicious behavior. But let's talk about his ideology, because this is where fans get into actual arguments. Light believes that if criminals fear divine punishment, crime will stop. And here's the uncomfortable part. It works. Crime rates plummet. Wars begin to cease. People are, objectively, safer. The pragmatic argument exists, and fans love to make it. But that altruistic mask hides something much uglier. Light doesn't just want to stop crime. He wants to be God. Capital G. He wants to reign over a new world where every human being behaves exactly how he decides they should, and anyone who disagrees gets a heart attack. That's not justice. That's totalitarianism with better branding. Now let's talk scale. The estimated kill count across the series exceeds 100,000. That's not a vigilante, that's a genocide conducted from a bedroom desk, and it escalates beyond criminals fast. Investigators who get too close, innocents who happen to be inconvenient, his own allies when they become liabilities. Nobody is safe once Light decides they're in his way. His methods are terrifyingly sophisticated. He specifies exact causes of death to stage accidents and suicides. He staggers kill times to send coded messages to law enforcement, essentially taunting them. And during the Yotsuba arc, he temporarily relinquishes ownership of the Death Note, which erases his memories of ever being Kira, allowing him to function as a genuine innocent member of the investigative team. Then, at a precisely calculated moment, he touches the notebook again, recovers every memory, and resumes his campaign without anyone being the wiser. That's not a teenager winging it. That's a strategic mind most fictional villains never reach. His rivalry with L is the backbone of the entire series. 2 geniuses locked in a battle where each knows the other is the enemy, but neither can prove it. Light infiltrates L's team, gains his trust, works alongside him daily, and the whole time he's planning exactly how to kill him. And he succeeds. He manipulates the Shinigami Rem into killing L by engineering a situation where Misa's life is threatened, knowing Rem will sacrifice herself to protect Misa and take L out in the process. He turns a death god's love into a murder weapon. That's cold on a level most writers wouldn't even attempt. Every relationship follows this pattern. Misa Amane is used exclusively for her Shinigami eyes. He feigns romantic interest to keep her loyal, knowing he'd let her die the second she stops being useful. Mikami is selected as a delegated executor and ultimately discarded when his rigidity creates a vulnerability. Every human being in Light's orbit is a tool, not a person, a tool. This is exactly why fan communities can't stop debating him. He consistently appears in best anime villain discussions, and the reason is uncomfortable. People root for him. They watch this mass murderer systematically dismantle everyone around him, and they want him to win. Because his charisma is absurd, his intelligence is genuinely impressive, and his initial pitch, that the world is broken and somebody should fix it, resonates with real frustrations that real people have. He's the villain who sounds right for about 5 minutes before you realize what right actually costs. The series' entire point about personal responsibility lives and dies with Light Yagami. No supernatural possession, no mind control. Just a brilliant, bored teenager who was handed power and revealed exactly who he always was underneath the perfect grades and the polite dinner conversation. But Light's not the only one with a Death Note, and the next person to pick one up might actually be more tragic than terrifying. Misa Amane. Misa Amane is either the most tragic character in Death Note or the most dangerous. And somehow, she's both at the same time. She enters the story during the second Kira arc, and everything about her arrival changes the game. Before Misa, the Death Note conflict is a chess match between two geniuses. After Misa, it becomes something messier, more emotional, and significantly more lethal. Because Misa isn't playing chess. She's playing with her entire life on the line, and she doesn't care. Here's her deal. Misa is a popular model and actress, born in Kyoto, roughly 152 centimeters tall, blood type AB. On paper, she looks like the last person who would become a serial killer, but her family was murdered by a criminal. The justice system failed her, and then Kira killed the man responsible. That single act turned Kira from a news story into Misa's entire reason for living. She didn't just support Kira, she worshipped him, and when the Shinigami Rem gave her a death note of her own, she had the means to prove it. But getting a death note wasn't enough for Misa. She wanted to be useful. She wanted to matter. So she made a deal that should make anyone uncomfortable if they think about it for more than 3 seconds. She traded half of her remaining lifespan for the Shinigami Eyes, the ability to see any person's real name and remaining lifespan just by looking at them. Half her life, gone, irreversible, not temporarily reduced, not conditionally shortened, permanently halved. Even if she lost the notebook, even if she gave up the eyes, that time was never coming back. And later in the series, she makes the deal a second time, cutting her already halved lifespan in half again. A quarter of her original life left, for Light Yagami. And she did this to be useful to a man who would never love her. Let me explain. Light Yagami recognized Misa's value immediately. A Death Note user with Shinigami eyes who could identify anyone on sight? That's not a girlfriend, that's a weapon. And Light treated her accordingly. He maintained just enough romantic pretense to keep her loyal while viewing her as entirely disposable. If Misa needed to die for his plans to succeed, Light would have let it happen without losing sleep. He says as much through his actions repeatedly throughout the series. Every moment of affection he shows her is calculated. Every kind word is strategic. She's a tool with a heartbeat, and he never pretends otherwise, at least not to the audience. But here's where it gets complicated. Misa isn't just some helpless pawn being dragged along. She demonstrates real, independent agency throughout the story. She orchestrated public messages to Kira before she even met Light. She created videotapes and sent them to television stations to force contact, which is not exactly the behavior of someone waiting around to be rescued. She leveraged her celebrity status to evade investigation, using her fame as both a shield and a distraction. She made contact with Kira on her own terms, not because anyone told her to, but because she decided to. That takes initiative, planning, and a level of boldness that most characters in the series never display. And then there's Rem. The Shinigami who gave Misa the notebook developed genuine emotional attachment to her, something almost unheard of in Shinigami behavior. Rem's connection to Misa becomes so strong that she ultimately sacrifices herself to protect Misa's life, writing L's name in her own death note and dying in the process. That's not something that happens for a passive character. Misa's existence literally reshapes the supernatural power dynamics of the entire series. A god of death chose to die for her. That's leverage nobody else in the story has. Light actually exploits this, engineering a situation where Rem has no choice but to kill L or watch Misa die. He weaponized a Shinigami's love, which is, not ideal. So when people reduce Misa to annoying girlfriend, they're missing the point entirely. She's a victim of horrific trauma whose grief gets weaponized by a narcissist who will never reciprocate her feelings. She's also a willing participant in a campaign of mass murder who independently chose to kill people and broadcast terror across Japan. Both things are true, simultaneously. Her villainy doesn't erase her victimhood, and her victimhood doesn't erase her villainy. There's also a perception issue worth addressing. Fans tend to judge Misa more harshly than male characters with similar or even stronger ideological commitments to Kira. Characters who kill for Kira out of devotion get called loyal or dedicated. Misa does the same thing and gets called clingy or irrational. The double standard is pretty obvious once you notice it. She's dangerous, she's capable, and she's being exploited. All three at the same time. The fact that she expresses her loyalty through romantic attachment rather than stoic professionalism doesn't make her less of a threat. It makes her a different kind of threat. The Shinigami Eyes deal is the perfect encapsulation of everything Misa represents. She literally shortened her own life to become more useful to someone who sees her as disposable. That's not stupidity. That's what grief and desperation look like when they find an outlet. She lost her family, found meaning in Kira's justice, and then poured every ounce of herself into serving that meaning. The tragedy isn't that she made the deal. The tragedy is that the person she made it for wouldn't have done the same for her. Not even close. But if Misa represents what happens when trauma meets devotion, the next Kira shows us what happens when the Death Note falls into the hands of someone with zero ideology and zero loyalty to anything except their own bank account. Kyosuke Higuchi. After Light's god complex and Misa's tragic devotion, you'd think the next Death Note villain would need some kind of grand motivation to keep things interesting. Turns out, no. Kyosuke Higuchi is just a guy who wants his quarterly earnings to look better. And honestly, that might be the most disturbing thing in the entire series. Higuchi is the head of technology development at the Yotsuba Corporation, and one of 8 members of the Yotsuba Group, a corporate collective that shows up during the Yotsuba arc, spanning chapters 34 through 59 of the manga. And his deal is painfully simple. He gets his hands on a Death Note and immediately starts using it to kill business rivals, manipulate stock prices, eliminate competitors, and secure contracts for Yotsuba. No ideology, no crusade, no grief. Just a supernatural murder weapon being treated like a line item on a corporate expense report. Hey, Higuchi, how'd you land that deal? Oh, killed the other guy. Anyway, lunch? Here's the thing. Light Yagami at least had the decency to dress up his murders in philosophy. He wanted to be a god. He wanted to reshape the world. You can disagree with every single thing he did and still understand the internal logic driving him. Misa killed out of love and trauma, which is horrifying but at least emotionally comprehensible. Higuchi kills because a competitor's product launch is scheduled for next quarter, and that's inconvenient for his department's numbers. He doesn't even wrestle with it. There's no sleepless night, no moment of moral hesitation, no dramatic internal monologue about the weight of taking a life. He just writes a name down and checks his portfolio the next morning. He strips away every layer of romanticism the series had built around the Death Note and reveals what it looks like when a completely ordinary greedy person gets access to infinite power. The answer is boring, efficient murder, which is, not ideal. Fan analyses consistently describe him as probably the second worst villain in the entire series, and that ranking isn't because he's the most dangerous or the most clever. It's because he has 0 redeeming qualities, 0 higher purpose, and 0 self-awareness about how pathetic his ambitions are. Light at least had the vision thing going. Higuchi has a corner office and a stock portfolio. He's the villain nobody roots for, and that's exactly why he works. He exists to prove that you don't need to be a genius or a philosopher to become a mass murderer. You just need to be greedy and powerful and have access to the right tool. Give this man a magical notebook that kills anyone whose name you write in it, and his first thought is market share. I don't know what to tell you. And unlike Light, who ran one of the most meticulous operations in anime history, Higuchi is sloppy. Genuinely, almost impressively, careless. He makes conspicuous decisions driven entirely by overconfidence, operating under the assumption that his corporate influence will shield him from consequences. He's the guy who thinks being rich makes him untouchable. He doesn't compartmentalize his kills or create elaborate alibis. He doesn't build layers of plausible deniability or plan for the possibility that someone might notice all his competitors keep dying at suspiciously convenient times. Light would have had 14 contingency plans and a backup notebook hidden inside a potato chip bag. Higuchi just kind of assumes nobody's paying attention because he's important. Spoiler, people were paying attention. The investigative team, which at this point includes Light during his memoryless period, systematically narrows down the suspects within Yotsuba, using bait scenarios and controlled information flows. They feed specific details to specific members and watch who acts on them. It's methodical, it's clever, and Higuchi walks right into it, because he lacks the paranoia that kept Light alive for so long. He doesn't adapt, he doesn't change his methods. He doesn't even consider the possibility that someone might be testing him, which is genuinely remarkable for a guy committing regular supernatural homicide. The team forces him into exposure, and his capture unfolds with the kind of inevitability that makes you realize he was never the main character of this story. He just thought he was. But here's where it gets really dark. Higuchi's entire arc, every kill, every corporate power play, every moment he thought he was running things, was actually serving Light's plan. His capture is the mechanism through which Light regains ownership of the Death Note and recovers his Kira memories. The second Light touches that notebook again, everything clicks back into place. Higuchi was a pawn in a chess game he didn't even know was being played. He thought he was the smartest guy in the room. He was a disposable decoy, and the real Kira was standing right next to him during the takedown, smiling internally. Cool. That's also a thing that happened. And narratively, that's the genius of the Yotsuba arc. Higuchi proves that the Death Note's danger isn't limited to one brilliant sociopath with a messiah complex. Any greedy, powerful person with access to that notebook becomes a mass murderer overnight. It expands the series' critique beyond individual morality and into something much bigger: capitalism, institutional corruption, the idea that corporate systems already treat human lives as expendable resources, and the Death Note just makes the math literal. Higuchi didn't become a different person when he got the notebook. He just got more efficient at being the person he already was. The Notebook didn't corrupt him, it revealed him. His incompetence also retroactively makes Light scarier. Watching Higuchi fumble through basic operational security and get caught within a single arc makes you realize just how exceptional Light's ability to evade detection actually was. Light did what Higuchi couldn't for years, under far more scrutiny against far smarter opponents. Higuchi is the control group. He's what happens when a normal person tries to be Kira, and the answer is they get caught almost immediately and die as a footnote in someone else's master plan. Not even a dramatic death either. Just a pawn removed from the board the second he stopped being useful. Great. Add that to the list of reasons this series is deeply unsettling. But if you think a corporate murderer with zero self-awareness is bad, wait until you meet the guy who worships Kira like a religion and takes the concept of blind devotion to its absolute extreme. Eru Mikami. Mikami is the perfect ending to this story because his story is Light's ending. Here's the thing about Teru Mikami. He's not some random fanatic Light pulled off the street. He's a criminal prosecutor, a guy who already spent his entire career deciding who deserves punishment and who doesn't. The Death Note didn't radicalize him, it just removed the paperwork. Before Kira ever entered his life, Mikami already believed in strict, uncompromising retribution. He already looked at the legal system and thought it was too soft, too full of loopholes, too willing to let guilty people walk. The Notebook didn't give him new convictions. It gave him a pen that actually enforced the ones he already had, which is, not ideal. Light selects Mikami as the hand of Kira, designating him ex-Kira and entrusting him with the real Death Note, the actual, genuine Notebook. Mikami's job is straightforward. Execute Kira's judgments, keep the killing machine running, and let Light maintain total anonymity. On paper, it's a brilliant delegation. Light gets to stay hidden while a true believer handles the dirty work. Hey Teru, could you just murder a few dozen people for me today? Thanks, pal. Delete this message. But here's where it gets complicated. Mikami doesn't just follow orders. He develops rituals around writing names. He treats every entry in the Notebook like a sacred act, a religious ceremony of purification. Where Higuchi saw the Death Note as a business tool and Misa saw it as a love letter to Kira, Mikami sees it as scripture. He's not executing people because Light told him to. He's executing people because he genuinely, deeply, fundamentally believes they deserve to die. The Notebook isn't a weapon to him. It's a holy instrument. And that distinction matters enormously because it means Mikami doesn't just obey Kira's ideology. He interprets it. He expands it. He acts on what he thinks Kira would want, even when Light hasn't explicitly told him to do anything. His operational zeal goes beyond loyalty into something closer to independent religious authority. He's not a soldier following commands. He's a priest interpreting divine will. This is what makes Mikami the logical extreme of everything Kira represents. He believes in Light's vision more rigidly than Light himself does. Light, for all his megalomania, is flexible. He adapts. He lies, manipulates, changes plans, sacrifices pieces on the board when needed. Light treats Kira's ideology as a framework he controls. Mikami treats it as an absolute truth he serves. And those two things look identical from the outside, but function completely differently under pressure, which brings us to the moment that ends everything. Nier and the investigative team know that Kira's power still depends on a physical notebook and a human executor. The illusion of invincibility, the idea that Kira is some omniscient god who can kill without trace or tool, only works if nobody can find the notebook. So they construct a sting operation specifically designed to track Mikami's movements, his routines, his patterns. And Mikami, bless his rigid little heart, has patterns. The man is a creature of absolute discipline and ritual. He goes to the same bank, he retrieves the notebook on schedule, he's predictable in a way that Light never would have been. But the real disaster comes when Mikami acts on his own. He makes a crucial decision based on his interpretation of what Kira would want, not on Light's actual instructions. He uses the notebook at a moment and in a way that Light did not anticipate or authorize. And in doing so, he reveals the existence of the real Death Note and compromises Light's entire operation. Nier's team catches the discrepancy, confirms that the notebook Mikami carries is genuine, and the whole house of cards collapses. Light's downfall doesn't come from a smarter enemy or a lucky break. It comes from the fact that the person he chose to carry his legacy believed in it too much. Now, the fan debate around this moment is genuinely interesting. Some people argue it's a plot hole, that a man as disciplined and devout as Mikami would never deviate from explicit orders, that the series needed a way to catch Light and force the mistake to make the plot work. And honestly, that's a fair criticism on the surface. But others argue it's entirely consistent with who Mikami is. His entire character is built on rigid ideology. He doesn't bend, he doesn't adapt. He sees the world in absolutes, and when a situation arises that requires strategic flexibility, he defaults to his own moral framework instead of waiting for instructions. He prioritizes his perception of justice over nuanced strategy because nuanced strategy requires doubt, and Mikami has zero doubt about anything. That's his whole deal. The irony is devastating when you think about it. Light needed two contradictory qualities in one person: someone flexible enough to adapt to unexpected situations, and someone devoted enough to never question orders. Those two things are fundamentally incompatible. Flexibility requires independent judgment, devotion requires suppression of it. You can't have both. Light's overconfidence in his ability to control a fanatic is what introduces human error at the worst possible moment. He delegated too much power to a single true believer and underestimated what ideological rigidity actually looks like when it meets reality. And symbolically, Mikami represents something that extends way beyond the plot of Death Note. He's a criminal prosecutor, an ordinary professional working within institutional justice, a guy with a law degree and a government salary. And the distance between this person deserves the maximum legal penalty and this person deserves to die by my hand turns out to be terrifyingly short when someone with authority encounters a tool that removes all constraints. Mikami embodies the dangerous proximity between institutional justice and extrajudicial killing. He's what happens when a charismatic authoritarian leader gives an ordinary true believer permission to act on impulses the system was specifically designed to contain. That's the real thesis of Death Note, honestly. The Notebook doesn't corrupt anyone. It reveals them. It amplifies what was already there. Light's God complex, Misa's desperate devotion, Higuchi's naked greed, Mikami's rigid fanaticism. Every single one of those traits existed before the Death Note showed up. The Notebook just removed the barriers that kept those traits from becoming lethal, and the fact that Light's entire empire crumbles because of someone who loved his vision too purely, too inflexibly, too completely. That's not a plot hole. That's poetic justice. The kind Mikami himself would have appreciated if he could have seen it from the outside. Not all stories end with the hero outsmarting the villain. Sometimes they end because the villain outsmarted himself by trusting someone who was exactly like him, just without the one quality that kept the whole thing running. Light had flexibility. Mikami had faith. And faith, it turns out, is a terrible substitute for strategy. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.